Well, one time when I was in college, some buddies of mine and I decided to spend spring break in San Miguel de Allende, a little town about an hour and a half north of Mexico City. And so we drove down to Nuevo Laredo on the Texas-Mexico border, jumped on a bus that drove through the night, and we woke up in this little artist colony. And I remember we checked into our hotel, and that night we got up on the roof of our hotel, and it connected to La Parroquia, this massive neo-Gothic cathedral that dominated the skyline in the center of the city. And so I'll never forget sitting on that rooftop of this gorgeous church, there was a men's choir downstairs that was singing hymns in Latin. And as they began to sing these beautiful hymns, looking out over this gorgeous architecture, over this colorful, artistic city, as the sun set and exploded into color, I remember the first time I felt like there was so much beauty, it made my heart ache. And I remember as a young man going, this is unbelievable. And I instinctively thought, man, I wish I had someone to share this with. And I was there with my buddy Ricardo. But I remember as I felt that, I was like, that's not what I meant. Like, Rick's a good dude, but I remember thinking, I want to share life with somebody. I want to be with a woman I can walk with through life. And I remember for me, I had never assumed I would get married because that felt like presumption, like God owes me a wife, and he doesn't. God owes me nothing. And yet for that first time I thought, man, but I really want one. I really want to be married. And I felt a longing that many of you feel very intensely even now. If I want to pair off and to journey with someone. And I want to say right at the beginning, as we've been marching through this series of singleness and now round the horn of dating into engagement, that longing to pair off is good. Actually, in this text, it was pre-fall, that before the fall of man, before sin entered, Adam felt that longing. I want to be with somebody. It's not good that I'm alone. And so then God sent him all these animals, and he was like, that's not what I meant. Like, a cool moose is great, and it's great to hang with the raccoons, but that's not what I'm looking for. And when God introduced him to Eve, he said, at last, someone who's a complement to me, someone who can help each other as we journey into all that God has for us together. That longing to pair off is good. The question we're asking today is, how do we do it well? And the honest answer today is, in our modern age, that's become more complicated. Adam, God just knocked him out. When he woke up, God was leading a naked woman towards him, and he broke into poetry. Worked out real well. But society has changed a lot in our days today, and it's brought in a lot of ambiguity. David Brooks, who's a columnist for the New York Times, said this. He said, young people today hit puberty around 13 and don't get married until past 30. That's 2 decades of coupling, uncoupling, hooking up, relationships, shopping around. This period isn't a transition anymore. It's a sprawling life stage, and nobody knows the rules. He said, once young people came a-calling as part of courtship. Then they had dating and going steady. But the rules of courtship have dissolved. They've been replaced by ambiguity and uncertainty. Cell phones, Facebook, text messages give people access to hundreds of friends, but that only increases the fluidity, drama, and anxiety. And as someone who's had the privilege to minister among young people, I've seen that something that should be associated with words like exciting and suspenseful and thrilling, meeting someone to pair off with for life, I hear more often explained as stressful, depressing. This should motivate poetry, not anxiety. And yet in our modern world today, it is difficult. And so we talked last week about who you should date, that the desire to pair off is good, but you want to pair off with the right person. And we talked about that far and away, the most important characteristic is someone who's chasing the same cause. If you're going to link hands and run with someone until death do you part, you want to be going the same direction in life. You want to be lockstep on the biggest decisions in life. Who do we think made this world? What's it for? What does he value? Because that'll shape my values. I want to chase him. So if you know Jesus, you want to link up with someone who knows him too and loves him. You want to chase the same cause. And then when you get that person, you got to look and say, do they have a God-chiseled character? Are they letting God shape who they are? Do they have a basis of morality outside of our relationship so that when I'm at my worst, they will still be honest with me and caring and gentle and kind because they have a foundation of morality external from our relationship? You want someone with a God-shaped character. And then you look for chemistry. Are they funny? Do they make me laugh? Do we like hanging out? Because much of life is just hanging out. And if you find them boring, don't do that, right? And so we said that's kind of basic principles of who you're looking for. Now today, we need to talk about how. What's the method you link up to that person? So that's who you're looking for. You're not looking for a soulmate in the sense of you're not looking for someone who will complete you as if you're this incomplete person that won't be complete until you meet them. That's not how God made humanity. If that's the case, then Jesus was incomplete and just never maximized his potential, and no one's willing to say that. No, you are complete. And it is entirely possible for you to fulfill your God-given destiny as a single person. Single on the front end of life, or even single if you're widowed or divorced. You have purpose, and God can accomplish those purposes through you. And so you're not incomplete, but what you're meant to do is run into God's purposes, and a great joy is being able to link hands and do it with someone else. And that linking of hands, there's different things to call it, but that journey from singleness into marriage, you pass through something called evaluation. Evaluating, are we meant to grip hands and run together, right? It's not a status to sit in, it is a process to move through. And there's been different processes throughout history. In the past and in many cultures today, parents take the lead in helping a child find the right person and evaluating who they should link up with and run with. In our modern society in America, it is dating. We spend time together, and what's the purpose of dating? Dating is for evaluation. What am I evaluating? Whether we're meant to link hands and run together. So dating is not a status we sit in. It is a process we move through. And the reality is in our culture today, many people instantly associate dating with drama. It's supposed to be tumultuous and chaotic. You listen to every song on the radio today and it's, I love you, I hate you, I love you and hate you. And you're like, it's not meant to, it doesn't have to be that way. I knew you were trouble when you walked in. Then why did you date him? Don't. It need not be like this. Life brings enough drama. Don't date drama. Date someone good that you can run into with drama. Don't date crazy. There's enough crazy out there. Date someone who you can face the crazy together with. So even though the seas are tumultuous, there are principles we can navigate by, and that's where we are here. And let me say again, I'm gonna talk about 7 principles of the how. How do we interact with each other? And again, there's some of you in here that maybe you're happy to be single or you're married and you go, oh good, this isn't about me. And check out, don't do it, because these are basic principles of how we should treat each other as humanity and how we should treat one another as believers in Jesus. So the principles here apply to all of us in many ways, and then specifically for us as we think about how do we pair off and begin to discern, are we meant to run together for a lifetime? So let me give you 7 principles of how. The first one of how you should date, I would say you need to date prayerfully. Prayerfully. Romans 8:28 says, we know God works all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Paul says there's a group of us and we know that God works all things and he works them for good for those of us who love him. 1 Peter 5 says cast all your cares on him because he cares about you. 1 John 4 says we have come to know and to believe in the love God has for us. And there's no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. Do you hear what's happening in those verses? For many of us, we enter into our horizontal relationships like it's all on us. I gotta impress that person to get the job. I gotta wow you in order for you to be interested in me. And we come in with an anxiety of I gotta work it in order to get your attention. But confidence in God takes the desperation out of dating. That suddenly I go, God is in the equation, so it's not all on me. He guides my steps. He determines my path, and he loves me. He's gonna take care of me. And when I begin to believe that perfect love casts out fear. He's working all things for the good for those who love him. And that confidence in God takes the desperation out of dating. It doesn't free you from making decisions, but it does free you up to make good ones. The longest chapter in Genesis was about this pairing off, Genesis 24. And back then it was the dad who took the lead in helping pair off. And it was Abraham looking at his servant and saying, it's time to go find a wife for my son Isaac. And he told him, hey, go to the old country, people who believe in God, unite my son with a woman who fears the same Lord that he does. And the servant gets nervous. Well, what if I can't find her? What if she won't come back? What if she won't journey with you? What if she won't live on the cutting edge of faith with him? And Abraham stops him and says, hey, the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, who called me to this land and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. He says, that God will lead you and you'll find a wife. And if you don't, you're free from my oath. But don't try to take my son back there. And I love his calm there. Hey, God's gonna take care of you and give him a wife, or God's not going to. But either way, I'm not gonna onboard a lot of anxiety. There's a liberty in that. God is in the equation. God is part of my story. God cares about you. And when you know that, you don't get to know all things, but you know the one who controls all things. And that's a comforting thought. So when you become Ruth out in the field, you can work the field of grain because it's right, but you don't have to work it in the field of grain to get Boaz's attention. Like, oh, Boaz is coming by. Oh, okay, hey, just picking grain. Like, you don't have to be weird. Proverbs 3 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, including dating, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. So we start prayerfully. I invite you in to this process, Lord. That's a great place to start.